Welcome back to The Perspective. I'm with Stephen Locke from Edelman. So trust in business, does that mean that business is trusted as an agent of change?
It's very interesting. We look at trust in a CEO. Trust in Indonesians' trust in CEOs is much higher than the global average. So internationally, as spokespeople and indeed as content creators, CEOs are not as trusted as other types of spokesperson or content creator. But here in Indonesia, they are much more trusted. So business leaders here, coupled with that high trust in the institution of business, have a great opportunity to drive change here. And my sense is that people look for business to drive change because much of the development of jobs and the economy, of course, has been driven by the business sector rather than by the government.
Okay. Well, moving on from business, media and general information systems, what does it show, the survey show, in terms of trust in news or other information sources?
Well, the top line result is that Indonesia is still one of the most trusting countries in the world, and I think it's a joint second in terms of Indonesians' trust in media. But when we unpack the results, we see some very interesting differences. So this year, we saw trust in mainstream media drop by 5 points after a number of years of growth. And my suspicion is that that somewhat reflects the year of elections that we've seen, in a general sense that in some respects, some in media were very, very partisan, and there was a loss of objectivity. So whether trust in mainstream media recovers as the election becomes a distant memory, or whether it continues to decline, we'll have to see over the years to come. What's interesting is that trust in social media in Indonesia, again one of the highest in the world, is almost eclipsing trust in mainstream media. So when we look out going forward, it's interesting to see how important in Indonesia social media is as a first source of information, but also to verify information. But the final thing is that Indonesians have a phenomenal trust in search engines. Now, in some countries, most notably, for instance, the USA, there has been some growing skepticism about search engines to do with rankings on search pages and so forth. That has slightly taken the heat off of trust in search engines. But here in Indonesia, by a very, very long way, Indonesians trust the results of search engines to verify news more than any other source of information.
Do you see any indicators as to whether you can tie a drop in trust in media specifically to the election? Are there factors beyond that? Would you say that the online search engines are taking over, and social media taking over?
I think it's quite interesting. In a number of emerging markets, including other ones that I've lived in before Indonesia, we've seen that some of the key influencers on social media are journalists, and that's very true here in Indonesia. And in some countries, what has happened is that social media is, if you like, the after party where journalists can say what they really think and say it at more length. And that's certainly been true in some countries where there's been quite tight state control of media. Now, bringing it back to Indonesia, I think that journalists will remain very important in terms of driving trust on social media. And my hope is, and my expectation, I think, is that the dip in trust in media we've seen in Indonesia this year will begin to reverse once the election becomes something of a distant memory.
So, what is the consequence then in the immediate future of these results, both for business and media?
We ask our audience, our 1,200 people, to rank the 16 most important things that build trust, and then trust in business, and then to say how good businesses are delivering it. This year, for the first time, Indonesians said quality of goods and services was the most important thing to build trust. I think that's interesting because previously Indonesians ranked that much lower, and it was almost as if having seen an explosion in choice for the first time, that was enough. But now Indonesians are becoming much more judgmental of goods and services, and so quality is more important. But in Indonesia, very different from the rest of the world, things like community relations, environmental sustainability, these all score much higher in Indonesia as things that build trust than we see in many other countries around the world. So that tells me, if I'm briefing CEOs on how best to deliver change in Indonesia, they've got to keep an eye on those three things: quality of goods and services, community relations stuff, and and environmental sustainability, and also treatment of employees is very important as well.
Great. We're going to take a very quick break, and we'll be back with the perspective.